Blog Talk Radio.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Inside Boxing Weekly. We had a special edition, and I obviously had the wrong music on since that was the football music, but we're live, and it's on 2 hours' notice. So I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Of course, we're here tonight to talk about Anthony Joshua and Wladimir Klitschko, which is probably the best heavyweight championship fight of the last 14, 15 years. But, of course, there's not really much to compare it to. I want to welcome in my co-host tonight, my normal Inside Boxing Weekly co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, Mike. I'm happy to be on, always happy to be on. Let's talk some boxing.
All right, let's try to keep the F words to a minimum since we can't edit them out tonight, Jeremiah. But, all right, guys. Also, I want to welcome to the show. We've got a couple of our writers on. We've got John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, good to be here. And the football music, boxing's got more contact than football, but we're in that kind of a mood after
it's
seeing
according who's
Joshua
fighting.
So
I mean, I've seen some Floyd Mayweather fights that didn't.
No, that music would not be appropriate for Mayweather-Berto.
Okay, whatever. Get off the music. I couldn't help it. I got bad eyesight. I'm almost 50 years old. Also, we've got Dave Siderski. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. I actually like the music, Mike, and I promise to keep my filter on.
Your filter on? I didn't know you said bad words, but all right. I thought that was just Jeremiah. All right, let's go ahead.
Choir boy, Dave.
We'll get to the point at hand. Today we had a post-war record of 90,000 fans at Wembley Stadium. They were treated to a seesaw contest between Anthony Joshua, who eventually stopped Wladimir Klitschko in the 11th round. This is the thing, and I'll start off with Jeremiah. And it's like I told you, this is the first time I've watched a heavyweight championship fight since probably 2002, 2003, probably Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis, where I actually, when they're walking to the ring, I actually was getting excited about this fight. And then on top of that, the first four rounds were kind of a downer, and then it picks up. And, I mean, it was like a throwback to 20 or 30 years ago when you were watching real fighters at heavyweight fighting. What's your opinion of this fight?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but my opinion of the fight is that it was probably what you wanted at that point in time. So you had a young up-and-coming heavyweight, billed as I don't want to say the next Lennox Lewis, but certainly, somebody that a lot of people have their high hopes on. You have a filling-out process for, again, like you said, the first four rounds. And then, the drama starts, and Joshua has to come back off the deck, ends up winning a fight. And in my opinion, it's what you would want. It's what you would expect out of a youngster, and I think it bodes well for his future.
Yeah, and Dave, I mean, the thing to me is you get around the fourth or fifth round or sixth round, Klitschko knocks him down. And I'm having flashbacks, and I'm looking at this muscle-bound British heavyweight, and I'm thinking, damn, he's another Frank Bruno.
Yeah, I was thinking John Tate right around that point in time. I mean, it was...
Yeah, but he's from Tennessee. That's not the same thing as Great Britain.
No, but... Yeah, it was an excellent fight. No complaints. Around the fifth, when Joshua put Klitschko down, I thought Klitschko was done. And then he comes back later in the round, puts hurts Joshua, puts him down. I thought Joshua looked exhausted, and when you see these guys, that they're undefeated, they have all these fights by knockout. I think Joshua had never gone more than 3 rounds. I'm thinking, no way. Not too many of these guys, who destroy everybody have late power, and yet Joshua was able to close the deal in the 11th round. Completely unexpected.
Yeah, and we'll go to John now. I mean, John, the other thing that stood out to me those first 4 or 5 rounds, neither one really did a lot. But it looked to me like Klitschko looked a lot, especially the first 3 rounds, like he did when he lost to Fury, where he threw almost no punches. It looked like it was going to be another one of those nights for him. And, I mean, I think there is a huge decline from a prime Wladimir Klitschko. But in the long run, I think tonight will do more his legacy than being the heavyweight champion of the world for 10 years?
I lean that way. I was already taking a little bit of heat on social media. I thought this was a great fight, like we all did. I agree when you look at, if you want to just take it as belts at stake, I agree it was probably the best heavyweight fight with belts at stake since Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis. But I looked at the fight that Wladimir Klitschko answered more questions from me than Anthony Joshua did. Klitschko showed that his performance when he showed heart against Samuel Peter in their first fight wasn't a fluke. He had to do it when he's older. And I think where he deserves even more credit than he's been getting for tonight's performance is it is very hard when you are at an advanced age like that to put yourself on the line to take those kind of risks. You know, you saw George Foreman do it late in his comeback against Alex Stewart when the side of his face was swelled up and he had to take the last round. You know, Archie Moore had some performances when he had to get off the deck when he was in his 40s. You know, Larry Holmes always showed heart when he was in his 40s. But this is extremely, extremely rare. And for Wladimir Klitschko to put himself in the conversation with those names in terms of courage at that age, I think that speaks very well of him. For me, Anthony Joshua, I can see what everybody's looking at, that this may turn out to be a moment of truth for him down the line where he got up off the canvas and got a win. But I don't think people are asking the question enough, what if Anthony Joshua was just in with a 41-year-old guy who was at the end of the line, who really was the same guy that didn't look very good against Bryant Jennings or Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua is a lot more flawed than we thought. I think people have to ask themselves that question after this fight. That may not be
I
the
think
case,
this, with his age, John, he has to be, with his age and his experience, he has to be flawed. You know, he can't be in his prime yet. I mean, his 19 fights, this is the first big-time fight he's had. It was against an older guy, but the one thing I do know is this. The one thing that separates average fighter from a great fighter, or a great fighter from a legend, is the ability to be in trouble and to keep fighting and to win the fight. So I think technically he has a lot to learn. And he may not learn that, and this may be as good as it ever gets for him. But the one thing about him you can't do is you can never question his heart now.
Well, again, let me play devil's advocate on that. This is a question I think needs to be asked going forward. I'm not saying this is going to be the case. But what if this was the same Wladimir Klitschko that was in the ring against Tyson Fury and Bryant Jennings, and Anthony Joshua just went life and death with him? Anthony Joshua might not be as good as we thought he was. He may get blown out by the next young prime guy he faces, who's a legit top 5 type person. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not going to make that prediction yet, but I think that question needs to be asked after what we saw tonight. Now,
yeah, but my question would be this. We've got 3 heavyweights that are combined 79-0 with 74 knockouts now. You got Joseph Parker, you got Deontay Wilder, you got Anthony Joshua. The thing is this. When you compare, the one thing Joshua has over both of them now is we've seen him get dropped, we've seen him in desperate trouble, and we've seen him come back to win. Now, the one thing we do know about all 3 of these guys is they all are technically flawed, Jeremiah. That's why right now I would give Joshua the advantage over both of them just because of what I saw tonight, even if it's a 41-year-old. A 41-year-old shot Klitschko is better than knocking out Gerald Washington with wild swinging punches.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that, even Wladimir Klitschko at this age has to rate above, any win Wilder's had, and just about any win that a lot of these guys have had. Unfortunately, Luis Ortiz hasn't gotten his chance. We haven't seen a lot of these guys in with top opposition. So I'm certainly in agreement there. Just the fact that Joshua was able to get off the deck and take a number of hard punches along the way and get a second wind and come back to stop Klitschko in the late rounds, it shows a lot of grit, and unfortunately we haven't seen that with guys like Deontay Wilder yet. We've seen him, I would say slightly in trouble here and there, but it's been few and far in between. So I think you're right. I think right now I'd have to give the edge to Joshua in a number of fights with most of the top guys. But I also agree with John in the sense that it's hard to tease out the details. I mean, because when you look at Wladimir Klitschko's performance against Joshua, and you look at his performance against Tyson Fury, Tyson Fury's win, we all know that it was boring, but that win didn't get half as much praise as the Joshua fight seems to. I mean, the British the British commentators were going crazy, saying, "Oh, the crown has been passed. Oh, this is a wonderful win. Yada yada yada." But again, Tyson Fury, in my opinion, made it look a bit easier against Klitschko. So I think both sides are worth examining. But I also do accept your point that Joshua should be slightly favored here.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not convinced on any of them either. I mean, I think Wilder has huge technical flaws. I'm not sure about Joshua. And the other question I have here is Dave Siderski. It's not like Klitschko threw a lot of punches in the first 3 or 4 rounds. And to me, it seemed like Joshua was very tight at the start of the fight. And it seemed also to me that he was breathing through his mouth by the 3rd or 4th round with his mouth open. I think that's a concern for me. And, I mean, there are a lot of concerns here. But, I mean, what is your take with Joshua? We haven't let you speak on it yet. Do you think he's the best of the 3 guys?
I think he is, as based on what we know as of right now, and it is still relatively early in his career. And a year later, we might see him get starched and see it entirely differently. But yes, he did seem to be breathing heavily early in the fight. But what I was impressed by was that that he was able to hang in there and show that late power. In most cases, when you see a guy breathing heavily that early, they're done. They're done. But this guy hung around and he turned the fight around.
Yeah, and Dave, I know that you're into the older stuff like I am because we're really old. So I'm going to ask this question to you.
Speak to yourself.
Because I watched this fight. This fight was exciting. You had the knockdowns, a little bit of back and forth action. But let's face it, this was by no means a great fight. This was a good fight that had a great finish. It had a great middle. But this was not Holmes and Norton. This was not Ali and Frazier. In England right now, if you get on anything written by the English people, you would think you just watched Ali Frazier 3, the Thriller in Manila again. I mean, where does this fight, do you think, stand in history? I mean, since Vitaly Klitschko's lost to Lennox Lewis, it's by far the best heavyweight title fight, but that's not really saying that much.
That's true. It's nowhere near. Ali Frazier is in a class by itself, both the first and the third fight. I would say this is probably the best one that I've seen since the Bo Holyfield trilogy.
Oh, there's no way this was better than Lewis and Klitschko. Go watch it again. Lewis and Klitschko was 6 rounds and these guys beating the hell out of each other. This was like 8 rounds of guys staring at each other, throwing jabs, and 3 or 4 rounds of them knocking the crap out of each other.
Well, it's I reserve the right to change my mind. It could be the recency era, and it could be that my expectations were pretty low coming in. But I was surprisingly pleased by this fight.
All right, Jeremiah, same question.
Same question. Well, I actually agree with you.
Was it a great fight? Was it a great fight, or was it just we're so used to 2 big guys just staring at each other and grabbing each other that it wouldn't take much to impress us?
No, I agree with you. Actually, I've been saying it on social media after the fight. I mean, was it a great fight? No, it wasn't. I mean, in my opinion, it was an
exciting fight.
It was an exciting fight. I mean, you had a build up, and again, you had a prospect do what you would want him to do at this stage of his career. If in the future he attempts to inherit the crown. But I agree with you. I mean, it wasn't a great fight. I mean, you look at the first 4 rounds, and again, like you said, I mean, a lot of the guys, all it is they're jabbing at one another. I mean, and you don't see a lot of power punches landed. I mean, Klitschko, his defense was tight. He was slick. Joshua barely landed anything until he finally opened up with combinations. Klitschko, again, it looked like he was just trying to feel him out. And I think a lot of us recognize that Wladimir Klitschko was trying to put Joshua in unseen territory and get him into the later rounds. And so, yeah, I mean, the first 4 rounds, it looks like they're filling each other out. I thought Joshua was winning based just on activity. But, yeah, you had the round 5 knockdown. You had the, real good round 6. But then again, what happens? I mean, after that, it transitions back into the jab fest. And I think that's where Klitschko went wrong. I mean, once he had Joshua on the ropes, had him gassing, I think he should have pressed the action more. I mean, had he done so, I don't know, maybe he gets a knockout. But, in my opinion, he allows Anthony Joshua to get a second win. Joshua finally finds the stamina to throw some combinations and ends up scoring a knockout. But, again, to your point, no, it wasn't a great fight.
All right. John, we know that you've, on thegruelingtruth.net, you do the original 8. To you, was this a heavyweight title fight? Because you got Tyson Fury as the man that beat the man. But then again, he's been out for almost 18 months now with the drugs and the food and the bad singing that Jeremiah loves. Should this even be considered a heavyweight title fight?
No,
I think Jeremiah thinks that actually Tyson Fury is singing to him when he sings "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing."
Hey, man, like I said, you can go anywhere, but don't talk about Tyson Fury's singing, okay? He's got the voice of Fergie, okay?
Fergie Jenkins, the old pitcher for the Cubs?
Yes.
Yeah, that might be more comparable. At least we haven't had to see him sing when he's had this long layoff. That's been one plus. I think, it's kind of funny because it was not a title fight, and that's what I looked at the fight a little bit differently than everybody else in terms of I understood the flaws that you three saw in the fight, but I did think it still came out as a great fight. But I saw it like Jeremiah, and it fits in with your question, Mike. I think what people are forgetting is this really wasn't a heavyweight title fight. That's how bad the hype got. But Fury was the linear champ, and Wladimir Klitschko had been off for 17 months. How could Wladimir Klitschko be? I mean, but the ring still had him as number one, and I think the ring tries to follow their policies. They were looking at it wasn't really his fault that fights hadn't been scheduled, and then somehow Transnational came up with Anthony Joshua as number one, but they both didn't have them as 1-2 because Transnational had dropped.
All right, so John, real quick, we got a caller on the line, so if you're that caller, we'll be to you right here in a second. But I got one quick question, John. When does it become, or when do you strip him? I mean, it's been a year and a half. Right. It doesn't look like he's anywhere near in shape to fight.
I agree with you, and I do contemplate these things. Traditionally, you don't strip the lineal champ, but with that said, I agree with you. I am about to come up with, I think the policy would have to be in the modern era, the most modern era, the way things have gotten. I would say 18 months of inactivity would probably do it for me, which Fury is about a month away from. So I've got him as of today as the lineal champ, but I'm being consistent. That would be the reason his 18-month clock is about to expire. For ratings, I look at it as a year, so that's why I didn't even have Klitschko in there. But for the lineal title, you give it a little bit more leeway. I think 18 months is reasonable, but I agree. How long can you go? You just have to consider him retired. I think that's the way you'd have to look at it until he comes back, and then he can get back in the ratings.
All right, we got a caller on the line. Welcome, caller. How you doing?
Jesse Regan. What's going on, guys?
All right. How you doing, Jesse? What you got for us?
All good, bro. I got a big one for you guys. You guys ready to put your bets on this one?
Shoot. Well, what do you got for us? Let's see.
I got Chavez beating Canelo.
Yeah. I can tell you this, and we talked about this on our show last week. I'm kind of starting to lean that way, too, just because of the size. And, I mean, Canelo has been, pretty much baby Jeremiah for the last few years.
Well, while I agree that he's been, I think his matchmaking has shown that he's a bit pampered. I mean, he really hasn't had to get gritty, get in the trenches, and get dirty. My thing is that I just don't think Chavez is talented enough to hang with a guy like Canelo, who looks in his physical prime. I mean, Chavez.
But Chavez walks around at one. Chavez walks around at 175, which you got to take into consideration.
Right,
so,
right, and I agree with that. But
he's going to come there overweight, take the fine, and win the match anyway, like Mayweather did to Juan Marquez.
Right.
But
okay.
But does it worry you at all that he's fought guys like Sergio Martinez, who was past his prime and got dominated, outboxed for 11 rounds before he landed one punch in the 12th round?
Sergio Martinez was not past his prime when he fought Chavez.
He wasn't? Okay.
No. He was.
John, what do you think? Canelo and Chavez.
He was past his prime when he fought Cotto, but not when he fought Chavez.
I think Canelo blows him out. I think that the mistake that people make, and of course, it's a matter of opinion, we're going to find out next week, but the odds makers at least reflect at this point, is I think people get too focused on the weight. Chavez and Canelo were both 154 way back at the same time. Chavez is taller, there's no doubt about that, but it comes to talent. It's not just weight. I mean, Roy Jones beat John Ruiz. I mean, extreme examples, but it's talent. It's not only weight. And I think that in this modern era, people have gotten too focused on weight, where they don't look at talent first. Now, if Canelo had been fighting at 147 pounds for the last 5 years, and Chavez had been fighting at 160 or 175 pounds for the last 5 years, to me that would be different. But I don't think that that's the case here. So I think Chavez just has not done enough since the Martinez fight. He doesn't have the amateur pedigree or the amateur background, and he's just not prepared to deal with Canelo at this point, in my opinion.
Dave, you want to give your opinion?
Winning that fight. I got Chavez winning that fight.
Okay, I think Chavez actually has a chance if he can land the big punch. But my problem with Chavez is this: he looks like he's in tremendous shape right now. Which, with Chavez, you never know when all of a sudden he's not going to be serious for a few days. I mean, he hasn't shown in his past that he is really dedicated to boxing. That's why I would have a hard time betting money on him. And I think in the end, you got Canelo Alvarez, who's a guy that since he was 10 years old has trained every day to be a great champion. Even though he's been pampered, you got to remember this: Chavez grew up with a silver spoon basically in his mouth. I mean, he fought, 40 fights in a row? He was fighting his 15th fight on pay-per-view against the guys that shouldn't have been on pay-per-view with him getting paid. And I just think in the long run, Canelo has had to pay his dues, and Canelo has trained for this moment. And I think Chavez is one of those guys. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm sorry to cut you off. But, that 12th round against Sergio Martinez, that's the Chavez heart. And it was almost like Chavez versus Meldrick Taylor in a sense.
I like Chavez in that round, but I think that he hasn't scored a knockdown since. That's the problem, and Canelo's never been down.
I'm going to agree with the caller on this one, and I'm going to go with Chavez.
Dave, caller, you're in trouble because Dave's never been right on a pick. Go ahead, Dave.
Fuck, really? Oh, man.
He was right once, like 2 or 3 years ago. But go ahead, Dave.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I got Mayweather Pacquiao right. just remember that. I think that was the last TV show we did together.
Oh, yeah, you did get Mayweather. So did I believe, didn't I? Or did I not? I don't remember.
You picked Pacquiao.
Yeah, but I did that just because I freaking hate Mayweather, so.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
me too.
I don't like Canelo either, so I'm hoping Chavez wins and I'm wrong, but I just think that it's hard to pick against somebody that day in and day out has worked his ass off since he's a little kid. To put it like this, Chavez to me is the kid in school that didn't do any homework for the previous 2 weeks, but then like 2 days before the test, he decides he's going to study his ass off for it, and then he's going to get a C and wonder why the hell he came up short. Go ahead, Dave.
I think it's Chavez's last 5 years that's the problem. It's the last 5 years that have not been good.
He hasn't beaten anybody since Andy Lee.
Right.
Who, Chavez?
Right. I mean, he hasn't beaten a ranked opponent since Andy Lee.
Well, he lost what was his name?
Bonfara?
Bonfara knocked him out. That's a ranked guy, but he got knocked out.
Right. But I'm talking about the last ranked opponent that he beat, and that was Andy Lee half a decade ago.
Yeah, I mean, he almost beat Sergio Martinez. It's going to be a lot better fight than people expect, trust me.
No, I think it'll actually be an exciting fight for as long as it lasts. And I do give a puncher's chance to Chavez. But did you get a chance today, Jesse, to watch the Klitschko-Joshua fight?
I didn't even. I knew Klitschko was going to beat him.
Well, Joshua won the fight.
What?
All right. So with that, Jesse,
Joshua
we will talk.
beat Klitschko?
Yeah, Joshua knocked out Klitschko in the 11th round. So hopefully you weren't planning on doubling your money off of that fight today with the fight next week. But we will do another show live this week with Canelo and Canelo Alvarez and Chavez. We will break that fight down with former cruiserweight champion Steve Cunningham. So Jesse, make sure you check that out. We're going to thank you for calling in today. We got to go to a commercial break real quick.
I'll tell you what happened to Klitschko.
All right, what happened to Klitschko?
After that Tyson Fury fight, that fight fucked up his mentality.
All right, we're going to go to a commercial. Jesse. I think Jesse has to go take some Rhodes Scholar classes now because it's obvious that he's a very intelligent young man. But we're going to go ahead. We're going to take a commercial break. We're going to come back and, I don't know, we'll probably talk a little bit more boxing.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about a football app called Gridiron Mo. If you've been a listener of the GrillingTruth.net for the last 2 years, I'm sure you've heard of Gridiron Mo, interactive football app where you get to call what the offense or defense should do during a live NFL game, see what all other fans have called also. But the great thing about this game is a game where you can sit down on a Sunday afternoon with your wife and your kids and actually play the game. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge to call a sweep right or a dive left or a pass play. So it's a great time to sit down and maybe get your wife and kids interested in watching the NFL with you. So if you want more information on Gridiron Mo, make sure you check out www.gridironmo.com. Replenishing Technologies helps athletes of all levels train, recover, and perform at their absolute best. We do this by offering the PEMF 120, the world's leading pulsed electromagnetic field therapy device. Workouts, injury, and stress cause cells to lose their natural power. PEMF works like a battery charger, helping cells regain the power needed to dump toxins, take in oxygen and nutrients, and repair. 95% of athletes report less pain, increased range of motion, more energy, and they simply feel better after using PEMF 120. If you'd like to count yourself among that group, contact us at www.replenishingtechnologiesinc.com.
This is David Diaz, former WBC lightweight champion of the world, and you're listening to The Grueling Truth.
All right, guys, we're back with Inside Boxing Weekly, special edition, talking about the Joshua-Klitschko fight. We just had Jesse, who called about the Canelo and Chavez fight. So if you heard that, I'm sure you got enough information. You need to go out and bet every penny you got on Chavez Jr. All right, we'll go to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, the one guy we haven't talked about is Joseph Parker. Where do you think Joseph Parker fits in with the heavyweight division? I mean, you brought up Ortiz a little bit. Of course, we've talked about Wilder and Joshua, but what about Ortiz? Or about Joshua? You know what I mean,
Parker.
Joseph Parker. Yeah, that's why we usually do this, tape delay on record it. So go ahead.
I think Parker's a good heavyweight. I mean, I think he'll be able to maintain a top 10 ranking for a while, and because he holds some silly trinket, a bunch of guys are going to want to fight him. But from what I saw in the Ruiz fight, I just don't think he ever garners a top spot. I mean, I like his hand speed. That's refreshing to see in a heavyweight division that needs something like that. But I just didn't see enough in the Ruiz fight, who I really don't think much of, to be honest with you. I mean, Ruiz, in my opinion, is and will remain a fringe contender. So again, I like Parker, but I just don't see him with the wherewithal to stop the top guys. In fact, I'd probably favor just about any of the top five guys over him. 41-year-old Klitschko, I think, stops him. Wilder, Joshua, Ortiz. I just don't think he's got that ability to put himself on top. He's just not that impressive to me.
All right, and John, I know that, like I said, the original 8, everybody needs to check that out. It's the way it should be. It's the way it was, back when boxing was at its best. But tell us a little bit your opinion. How long do you think before Wilder fights Joshua? Do you think this is something where both sides are going to milk this for as much as they can before they fight, or do you think it's something that's going to happen relatively soon?
Now, I'm concerned. That's the fight I'd most like to see next, but I think that there are reasons to be concerned. First of all, I think what I didn't see a lot of people talking about post-fight is, in that interview, I saw nothing out of Wladimir Klitschko that indicated he wasn't going to exercise a rematch clause. And at his age, after the shots he took tonight, even though he showed tremendous heart, a rematch is not going to go well. He certainly did not tank, and he enhanced his legacy with the heart he fought with tonight. But that doesn't mean that that's going to happen again. You think of like Jersey Joe Walcott, Rocky Marciano II, Dwight Muhammad Cowie, Evander Holyfield II. You got a tremendous legendary first fight, and then the second fight, the older fighter just comes up the steps and it's not there and gets paid, and that's it. I mean, if Joshua got $20 million for this fight and Klitschko got 12.5, and they're thinking there might be more the next time, well, we might be, even though this was a great fight, I thought we might be subjected to that again. I don't want to see it. So I think we could get that. Then, of course, from a British perspective, obviously, if Fury's going to come back, him and Joshua would be a huge sell over there. Now, that might have the linear championship involved. It's going to in one way or another, I suppose. Even if Fury would stop getting recognized, he was the last one to win it in the ring, so it could have a sell there. So I don't know where Wilder's going to fit in there, even though I'd love to see him and Joshua. I think we may be getting Wilder, Joseph Parker would be my guess, and I look at Joseph Parker like Jeremiah does. He became more of a boxer than a destroyer when he stepped up in competition, and he's legitimate top 10, no doubt, but I think that Deontay Wilder correctly thinks that he will handle Joseph Parker. So I think you might get Parker and Wilder. Look, Parker was only a very slight favorite over Huey Fury, and the odds makers have to know. So that really concerns me. If you're a Joseph Parker fan, that's got to concern you that he was a slight favorite over Huey Fury in his home country before Fury pulled out. So I'd like to see Wilder Joshua in terms of fights that could be made talent-wise in the heavyweight division. That's the best fight out there. For me, when I figure it out, when the dust settles in terms of the ranked contenders, Joshua's probably going to move up to number 1, even though Klitschko hadn't fought for 17 months and Wilder be 2. So that to me is the 1 and 2 guys in the ring, if that can be put together. But I'm not optimistic right now.
Yeah, but see, I think also you want to build that fight. And in America, nobody really knows who Deontay Wilder is unless you're a boxing fan. So to me, what would not surprise me, Dave, is if I could see Parker fighting Wilder, which actually I think would be a great matchup to the point that I think is by far Wilder's toughest test, and I think we'd actually find out something about him then finally, John. And I think you're going to end up with Anthony Joshua fighting Tony Bellew.
They're talking about him and Wilder, actually, and that wouldn't shock me even though I do like Wilder, the way his last 2 years have gone, because somehow Bellew has popped into the transnational 10th spot.
Because he beat David Haye, and let's face it, Tony Bellew sells a lot of tickets over there.
Yeah, and I think Wilder will blast him out, and he could go over there and get a huge payday. So that I agree that if it's not Parker, it could be Bellew in the meantime. Which these are fights we don't want to see. So
please no.
I mean Wilder, Parker, but I'm not looking for Wilder, Bellew. I hope nobody else is.
No.
Yeah, because still to me, I mean, if David Haye doesn't get hurt, I still think that he was starting to take that fight over.
I don't think anything of David Haye at this point either. We talked about.
I don't either. That's what I'm trying to get through right there.
Who was the last heavyweight? Who was the last heavyweight? I mean, David Haye hasn't had a significant heavyweight win since Nikolai Valuev. I mean, I don't know.
It's really a stretch to call that significant.
Exactly, Bud. So I think this whole idea that Haye was ranked and that this was meaningful, to me, that's where, another of the many examples all of us can point out of where boxing threatens to send itself down the tubes.
Yeah, I personally think. I was going to say that I think I just wanted to mention real quick, about because I haven't seen Transnational's rankings in a bit, but if they do in fact have Tony Bellew ranked at number 10, you've got to wonder why. I mean, John and I have talked about the British bias in Transnational before, and that just looks like another case of it. I mean, you got Bellew, you got White, you got Joshua on top. I don't understand.
Martin Murray at 10 at super middleweight.
Yeah, I mean, how do you get those?
I don't see how you get there.
Yeah, but he's seen his better days too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
I
like
done.
Transnational in the concept, but that's got to be cleaned up a bit.
Yeah, well, the problem is this: with any ratings, you're always going to have people that are buying rankings. It's always happened in boxing. You've got promoters that want their guys. I mean, it's like the WBC. I mean, they always favored Don King fighters. 70s and 80s, if you're a Don King fighter, you're going to show up, you're going to be ranked no matter what. So,
but the problem is that Transnational is supposed to be impartial. They're supposed to take all of that away, and they're just not doing an adequate job.
Well, anytime you've got that much money involved in anything, though, it's hard to keep it impartial. Our government was supposed to be impartial at one point. We were supposed to vote on stuff, and it was supposed to be a republic, and, you weren't supposed to have pharmaceutical companies buying people off, shit like that. But it happened. Because anytime you get money involved in something, people always get greedy. But the one good thing about this, I think when you talk about boxing dying off, it definitely isn't in Europe and England. And Dave, I mean, 90,000 people at Wembley Stadium to watch a heavyweight title fight. I think we can safely say this. I can't stand MMA. Even though we have MMA shows, I don't do them. So I can use that as my defense. But I don't think you could ever find an MMA event that would be like what we saw today.
Exactly, and I think, unfortunately, I do think there'll be a rematch between Joshua and Klitschko. There's just too much money to be made. I too do not want to see it because I think that fight was actually stopped too late. And with the beating
I do too.
Klitschko
He was done the first knockdown there.
Yeah, I can't see a 41-year-old guy, recovering from that. So,
he's not going to get better.
No, he's not. This was sort of his last hurrah.
Yeah, and Joshua will get better from this fight because I guarantee you, Joshua learned a ton of stuff in there.
Yes.
And what I don't want to see is Vladimir Klitschko end his career like 90% of every other heavyweight champion we've ever seen, with him in the corner getting the hell beat out of him by somebody that 7 years before he would have destroyed.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, our suffering brain.
Yeah, I mean, still, the worst boxing event I ever saw where nobody died was the night Larry Holmes, beat up an old Muhammad Ali. I mean, nothing was sadder than that. And it's still criminal that the Las Vegas Commission didn't stop the fight and that his corner didn't stop the fight before they did.
Totally agree. Ali should have retired after the third Frazier fight.
Yeah, but nobody ever retires when they're supposed to, hardly.
Now when you can collect those paychecks.
No.
I mean, if he could have just retired after the second Spinks fight, everything would have been fine. I mean, not fine physically. I think there was some other stuff going on there, but I mean, he wouldn't have been as bad. I mean, at least we wouldn't have to see him get destroyed by Holmes. I mean, the fact that he lost to Leon Spinks the first time they fought tells you he should have retired before that fight ever happened. Because of Leon Spinks that fought an 8-round draw with Scott Ledoux, and Ledoux, if you watched the fight, probably won the fight. I mean, if Scott Ledoux's beating the guy that's beating you, you don't need to be fighting. But and the thing is this, I think with Wladimir Klitschko, you know, Vitaly got out when Vitaly needed to get out. And it would almost surprise me if Wladimir would fight again, just because it seems like they both are fairly intelligent guys, and he should realize that this can't get any better. But I don't know. What's your opinion, Jeremiah?
No, I think you're right. I mean, Wladimir, he's been a good ambassador to the sport, you know, mostly outside the ring. I mean, unfortunately, he's bred a lot of indifference when he was inside the ring fighting in Europe for so many years. But yeah, I mean, he knows, again, he knows his way around the ring. He knows his way around the sport. The problem is that when you have, you know, potentially 90,000 people again filling an arena, and you're looking at, you know, tens of millions of dollars, you're going to.
I know it's hard to turn down.
You're going to, you know, and again, if I think Klitschko could probably stand to take one more beating for that paycheck. I mean, I'm not encouraging him to do so, but I mean, you know, put yourself in his position. I mean, if that was you have that offer on the table, yeah, I'd take it, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, I'll fight you for it, Jeremiah.
We'll get tens of dollars, not tens of millions.
I know. Well, maybe Dave and John would kick in like $10 each. We'd go winner take all of those for $20.
Throw it in the pit in the middle.
How much do you weigh, Jeremiah?
About 170.
Oh well, according to Jesse, then I'd kick the shit out of you because I weigh like 230.
Yeah, stick.
Jesse was the guy that called before the break. And if anybody wants to call in right now, this is the perfect time to do it because you can't be worse than our last caller. So the call-in number is 323-642-1210. All right, we got about 15, 16 minutes left in the show. I want to go here. We're going to talk about Wladimir Klitschko because we're all hoping there's no rematch. Where does Wladimir Klitschko rank, Dave, all-time heavyweight division? Is he top 10, top 15, 20? Where would you rank him?
Well, before the fight, I would have said top 15, probably somewhere around 12 or 13. I was impressed tonight. I was, you know, he still gets dinged for some of the knockout losses he suffered earlier in his career, but you know, you can't take away from him that he dominated the division for 10 years, made like 23 successful title defenses. Yeah, the opposition was substandard, but you know, even tonight, 41 years old, he's past his prime, and he gives a young up and coming, potentially the next great heavyweight on the scene, Anthony Joshua, a really good fight, and he rebounds from adversity, and you know, he takes a lot of punishment and he hangs in there. So, I'm not quite sure I'm ready to put him in the top 10. Yet, but I'm willing to think about it.
All right, John.
I see it very similarly to Dave. One thing I found very interesting is the latest print version of the ring had 30 really good panelists and did a poll of the top heavyweights of all time. Of course, before the fight we saw today, and Wladimir Klitschko was 16th. I think as we stand tonight, until we see what Anthony Joshua becomes and if this was a defining moment, if he becomes great, I'd say the story of the night was that Wladimir Klitschko does put himself, as Dave suggested, threatening the top 10, where had he had a bad effort tonight or just quit or something like that, he would have stayed in that 16 area or been even worse. And this way, as the dust settles, he's going to have an argument that he had some heart, and especially if Anthony Joshua does end up being great and he gave him that kind of a test, it's going to give him the argument at least to get into the bottom part of the top 10 there. And this ring panel had on it people like Teddy Atlas, Virgil Hunter, Don Turner, Russell Peltz, Al Bernstein, Ron Borges. They were just some of the people on there. So I think it's one. These lists, as we all four of us know, are actually hard to put together when you try to do them. And this is one of the better ones I've seen in recent years. So I would say Klitschko probably moved himself up as things stand tonight.
Well, see, my thing is this. Yeah, did they have Jack Dempsey ranked ahead of him?
They had Jack Dempsey ranked at 6.
See, I mean, who did Jack Dempsey beat?
Yeah.
And I mean, Jack Dempsey was not an active champion. And let's face it, if you put Jack Dempsey and Vladimir Klitschko in a ring together, things aren't going to go good for Jack Dempsey, I don't think.
No, I agree with that. I think there's kind of two types of polls when you do these all-time polls. To me, is the ones that sort of just look at the person in their era. I think this one slants a little more that way, and then one which I don't think there's a right way to do it necessarily, but the other one would be, as you're describing, where you look a little more like about who would actually beat who.
The way I look at it, sorry I interrupted you, but the way I look at it is this. I don't look at it necessarily as who would win if they fought in their time. I look at who was more dominant in their time. And Jack Dempsey was not as dominant as Klitschko. Because, number one, he defended his title, 4, 5, 6 times in, 8 years. And the guys he beat, were not he didn't even fight what were the best fighters because a lot of those guys were black. He didn't fight him. He signed to fight one time as the best defense anybody can give for him. So Klitschko beat everybody. And Alexander Povetkin would kill George Carpentier. So that's the Jack Dempsey argument always irritates me. The Jack Johnson argument irritates me. Because I think Klitschko, the fact that you're the heavyweight champion for a decade, almost anybody that was heavyweight champion that long, Larry Holmes, 8.5 years, he didn't really get touched in those 8.5 years. He got knocked down a couple times. But Lennox Lewis, you fight enough 230, 240-pound men over 10 years and you don't get beat? I think that's pretty impressive. These heavyweights are so big now. It's not like 1940 where you're fighting 200-pound heavyweights. These are 250-pound grown men that no matter how talented are, if they hit you with a shot, you're going down.
Well, that's the thing that you have to look at when you're evaluating heavyweights is that you're going to hit the canvas.
And the thing is this: I've heard people question Klitschko's heart, but I saw him get off the canvas repeatedly against Sam Peter and win the fight. Corey Sanders, it wasn't like he just went down once and stayed there. This dude has always got up and fought. He didn't have the greatest chin.
He quit against Ross Purity. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, which is also real early in his career, and since then, I think that he's pretty much vindicated that. That's like saying that Roberto Duran had no heart because he quit against Sugar Ray Leonard. There's a lot of other cases where he did have heart. Sometimes you just have a bad night. Jeremiah has them all the time. Jeremiah, where do you think Klitschko ranks?
Oh, man, I just show up to this show like bad night on my shoulders. I don't know, just stumble my way through it like a drunk. But
I do it too, so that's why we get along so well.
Exactly. But I think it's, I would really have to take a long, hard look at it because I'm not a guy who has a solidified top 10. I think a lot of you guys who are familiar with me, lists are hard for me. It's one of those things where it takes a lot. You have to know the nuances of a guy's record, the era, et cetera, et cetera. For my part, I think you can look at it in the way you do, where you could say, hey, you put Vladimir Klitschko against Rocky Marciano, who's almost always rated. He's always rated in the top 10, but he's generally rated 5 or better. Klitschko whoops him. Klitschko, I think he beat Dempsey.
But then again, it's hard to vote against a guy that never lost.
But yes, but my thing, however, is, on the flip side, it's Vladimir Klitschko. He did lose to Ross Purity. He did lose to Brewster. He did lose to Corey Sanders. It's all good and well to say that he reformed himself and he looked better. That's great, but you still have to take those into account.
But the thing is this, it's not like it was hit and miss. For 10 years, he didn't lose after that.
Yeah,
he got Emmanuel
Stewart,
which I think is the reason that changed.
Right, yeah. He changed his style. If you watch Vladimir Klitschko in his early days, There was a lot more infighting, a lot more hooks up close. He was different stylistically. He was quicker. But yeah, I mean, Stewart evolved his style and he became a better fighter. But then, of course, you evaluate the era, and it's not as if Klitschko was knocking down a bunch of killers. I mean, I've always been high on Alexander Povetkin. Again, I'm disappointed that he's, off using PEDs, but, I think that's a good win. I think a number of these other wins, but he didn't fight an all-time great. He didn't fight anybody that you would sit there and say,
yeah, but you can't hold it against him because he didn't have an all-time great to fight. Who was the all-time great that Dempsey beat or Marciano beat? Because Joe Louis was old.
Well, Marciano beat a lot of all-time greats. I mean,
Larry Holmes at least beat some really good fighters. There may not have been any legends there, but he beats Mike Weaver, he beats Ernie Shavers, he beats Ken Norton. Jerry Cooney was a solid fighter that was just mismanaged. Tim Witherspoon, a young Tim Witherspoon before Don King got in his head, was a good fighter. So, I mean, Larry Holmes did beat some good. I mean, Larry Holmes, when he was, 45, beats Ray Mercer, who was a top 5 contender at the time.
Holmes,
but I think
Holmes helped himself then, but I think that Holmes' era was weak, like Klitschko's.
No, I don't think it's anywhere near Klitschko's. I think Klitschko's is the worst era that has been outside of maybe Dempsey's era. But Dempsey's era wasn't that bad. The problem was the better fighters weren't allowed to fight. The African Americans weren't going to be able to fight for the heavyweight title.
Right, and part of that was William Muldoon, who was, I believe he was the commissioner at the time. He was racist, and he didn't want Dempsey fighting any blacks. Therefore, he leveraged for Gene Tunney to get the fight, and Dempsey had his hands tied and did what he did. But the thing about
it's the same thing with the baseball players. I mean, if you look at Babe Ruth, I mean, everybody always said there should be an asterisk next to Mark McGwire. Well, there should, because he cheated. But there's got to be an asterisk next to Babe Ruth because he didn't get to play against the best players.
Well, I mean, how
far
not
do we all the best players. I mean, you could put an asterisk by almost anything over the last century.
Well, right. I mean, how far do we want to take that argument? Because what about in boxing? I mean, the Soviet guys, the Cubans, have they been able to compete as pros for years? I mean, you look at a guy like Aldama, who Sugar Ray Leonard beat. I mean, you let him go pro, who knows what happens? Maybe he beats Aaron Pryor. I mean, you can extend that argument pretty far. But
that's what I mean. The argument is in every sport for an entire century.
Right. But
I mean, there's always something.
Right. So the thing about Klitschko is, again, on one side, he's losing a Purity, he's losing a Brewster, and that I thought the Brewster loss was in the Stewart era. I could be wrong. But, he loses guys.
That was his first fight. It was his first fight with Stewart. He got knocked out by
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I was right there. So the thing is, you have a weak era. You've got guys he's losing to that he shouldn't be, and then the reformation, and now him fighting on a top level still. But like John said, we're going to have to wait and see what Anthony Joshua does. But again, I want to flip it again. So oftentimes I see Sonny Liston rated in the top 10, and no doubt I think Sonny Liston was a great fighter. He had a wonderful jab, big power. But you look at his resume, and
he didn't beat anybody.
What's really there?
Cleveland Williams, who might have been in his prime then, may have been his best win. Because Floyd Patterson was a cruiserweight. And Mike Tyson was another one.
Floyd Patterson was...
Yeah, but Patterson was a light heavyweight cruiserweight. I mean, Patterson was like Ken Norton. If he wasn't a big puncher, he was a great fighter. But if you were a big puncher, he was going to make an early exit.
Yeah, Liston would not be in my top 10 either.
And Mike Tyson can't be in anybody's top 10. I mean, to me, Mike Tyson's nowhere near Vladimir Klitschko.
The ring had Mike Tyson at 9 and Sonny. The ring had Mike Tyson at 9 and Sonny Liston at 10.
Too high.
See, I'm just not in love with Liston, to be honest with you. I mean, his championship reign was so short. He creams Patterson. Machkin goes the distance with him. Tyson, I think, for a lot of people, is what he was at his prime, that 88, 89 era. And you think to yourself, a lot of people do, they think to themselves, hey, that Mike Tyson hangs with just about anybody ever.
Right.
Yeah, but the problem is that Mike Tyson never fought anybody. I mean, that Mike Tyson in 1986, 87, had trouble beating James Quick Tillis, who was a stick-and-move fighter, who was also well past his prime. I'm not so sure that you throw Mike Tyson from 1988 in the ring in Tokyo in 1990 that he still doesn't get his ass handed to him by Buster Douglas, because Buster Douglas fought the style Tyson had trouble with.
I think the
I think here it is.
I just think the Tyson that ran through, Holmes only got stopped once by Mike Tyson, and Michael Spinks only got stopped once by Mike Tyson. Those are two of the greatest fighters of all time.
But Larry Holmes was nowhere near what Larry Holmes was even 5 years later. They gave him like 30 days to train, John. He took it for the money to buy a new hotel.
He still only got stopped once in his career. I think that Tyson. I mean, I agree. Like Jeremiah said, we look at that, but you saw that Tyson, and it's not like I'm this massive fan of Tyson, but just having seen it and having seen how he went through all the Holmes era guys, and to me, treated the Holmes era guys as what they were, which were not particularly great heavyweights. And then,
but those Holmes era guys were past their prime when they fought Tyson. Trevor Berbick in 1980 was a lot better than 1986 or 87.
Trevor Berbick got knocked out by Mike Tyson in 2 rounds because that's what Trevor Berbick was. Same with Pinklin Thomas. It's just that Tyson showed the Holmes era for what it was.
I think Pinklin Thomas without cocaine might have been the best heavyweight of the 1980s. And if you remember that fight, Thomas gave him trouble for 3 rounds until he ran out of gas because he was always coked up for the 5 years before.
It was Larry Holmes and a bunch of guys that were not great fighters, and Tyson showed that. And then he went through, Michael Spinks. He went through Holmes himself.
But Spinks was shot by that. You remember this? Spinks, if you watch that fight, had knee braces on both knees. I mean, I don't think Spinks had much left. And Spinks was a light heavyweight. Spinks only beat Holmes because Holmes was shot in 1985. I mean, he was shot in 88. I mean, he took a couple years off. He came back. He trained. He changed a little bit the way he fought, and he was fine again. So I think the Larry Holmes that fought Evander Holyfield in 91 wouldn't have got knocked out in 4 rounds by Mike Tyson.
I mean,
go ahead.
I think you can you can make the argument that Mike Tyson is a top 5 all-time heavyweight talent, but in terms of accomplishments, no, he doesn't belong anywhere near the top 10. Never once rallied in the face of adversity, and he beat a bunch of inferior guys, some decent heavyweights back in the late 80s, but certainly nobody who touches anywhere near the top 50 or 75 of the heavyweight division. And when he fought Lewis and Holyfield, the 2 best guys of his era, he failed miserably, and I think that that's got to reflect in his historical ranking.
Yeah, and the thing is this, people say they were past or he was past his prime, but he was younger than those guys. And let's face it, if a fighter only had a prime that lasted basically like 18 to 24 months, is he really that good of a fighter? Because his prime was shortened because of his own mental deficiencies, which I think is the reason why if he fights a Larry Holmes in 1980, Larry Holmes would have beat him. I don't think that Tyson could have faced adversity and overcome it. He never did in his career.
Yeah, I don't think Tyson would necessarily make my top 10, but I see the argument, as Jeremiah pointed out, which I always grapple with myself, is that if you took the lineal titleist Tyson who had just knocked out Spinks and he knocked out Holmes, you feel that guy would have been trouble for anyone. But I agree, and like Dave said, I don't disagree with that. In terms of just pure accomplishments, he doesn't quite crack the top 10.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up because we only got like a minute left, John. We've killed an hour here. So if y'all want, we can do it again like 2 hours from now. But I want to thank everybody for listening in. I mean, on 2 hours' notice, there's a fairly large amount of people on here right now listening. So we want to thank you guys. Make sure you check out The Grueling Truth at thegruelingtruth.net. Check out all of our shows on iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher. Pretty much anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, Dave Siderski, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth.